BMF. Can we go back to what we do best? Hustling?
When you actually got to see the show, you watched the whole first season?
Yeah.
What did you think?
55% accurate, 45% fake.
Demetrius Flenory and his brother, Terry, ran one of the country's largest drug operations during the late 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, generated hundreds of millions of dollars, and even had a successful record label and magazine.
Everybody knows the BMF series tells the story of brothers Demetrius, Big Meech, Flenory, and Terry, Southwest T, Flenory, turning their $250 million empire into a TV phenomenon. The show heavily leans on themes like family, loyalty, and betrayal in the pursuit of the American dream.
So what you say? Being bosses.
But the real BMF story goes way deeper than that. Every player, rival, and enforcer helped turn it into a massive transnational drug empire, one that the series can only scratch the surface of. Let's get into it. The series kicks off by showing how the Flenory Brothers came up from nothing, literally selling $50 bags of cocaine on the streets of Ecorse and Detroit. Back then, their little crew went by the name 50 Boyz, a nod to those same $50 bags they pushed day and night. Meech, played by his real-life son Demetrius Flenory Jr., comes across as the smooth-talking, charismatic visionary, the one who could walk into any room and instantly command attention.
I'll be out, but y'all gonna be following in my footsteps.
Terry, played by Da Vinci, is the younger brother with the sharp business sense, always analyzing, planning, and thinking 5 steps ahead. But beneath that cool-headed exterior, Terry's constantly torn between building a future and staying trapped in the game that's funding it.
People are gonna get high regardless. If somebody's gonna get paid, it might as well be me and Meech.
In real life, Meech and Terry really were out there hustling $50 bags during their high school days in the late 1980s. But everything changed when they crossed paths with a man named E.D. Boyd, a major figure in Detroit's drug scene at the time. Boyd was the one who started the 50 Boyz movement, one of the biggest and most powerful drug organizations in the city during the height of the crack era. For the Flenory Brothers, linking up with him was like getting called up from the minor leagues straight into the majors. Boyd saw potential in the brothers, especially in how Meech could move product and how Terry could manage numbers. He trusted them with real weight, and that's when the money started rolling in fast. They quickly realized was a whole different game compared to weed. The profit margins were insane, and for the first time in their lives, they were thriving.
It's time to buy, let me get a half a brick, let me get 1 brick, let me get 2 bricks, let me get 3 bricks.
But as every street story goes, success draws attention, and not all of it good. Soon enough, Meech and Terry found themselves caught up in a growing beef with another Detroit dealer named Layden Simon. What started as a small street dispute turned into full-blown tension that wouldn't stay quiet. Things kept getting hotter until Simon allegedly decided to make a move to end the Flenory Brothers for good. One day, he set up a drive-by shooting that could have taken Meech's life. But Meech wasn't built to fold. Getting shot at didn't scare him, it lit a fire under him. That incident became the turning point. The brothers realized that working under someone else meant their lives were in another man's hands. They wanted control, so they made the boldest decision of their young lives. They found their own direct supplier, cutting out the middleman completely. That one move changed everything. Suddenly, they weren't just dealers in someone else's empire, they were building one of their own. Meanwhile, E.D. Boyd saw what was happening and decided it was time to step away. Instead of going out in a blaze of violence or ending up behind bars like so many others, he bowed out on his own terms. What's rare is that Boyd didn't just disappear quietly. He gave Meech and Terry his blessing to take the reins of the organization he had built.
They said, well, do you mind if we got weight on our own and did our own thing? I said, look, man, I knew this time was coming sooner or later, because I raised y'all to be bosses. I gave them, all the respect, and I said, man, look, do what you do, man. That's what you was raised to do in this game, be a boss, and I see you ready for it. Go forward.
Years later, in an interview with DJ Vlad, Boyd revealed that he's still cool with the brothers and doesn't regret stepping away when he did. That kind of clean exit in the drug world is almost unheard of, but somehow, he pulled it off. With Boyd out of the game, the Flenory Brothers stepped all the way in. They weren't just moving weight, they were running Detroit. Their operation got tighter, their money piled higher, and their reputation spread fast. From the corners to the nightclubs, everybody knew the name Flenory. They had power, respect, and more cash than most legitimate businessmen. But as their empire grew, so did the cracks beneath it. The same brothers who once shared everything were slowly drifting apart. The bond that built the empire would soon become the same thing that tore it down. In the early seasons of BMF, one character stood out as the show's most unhinged and terrifying presence: Lamar Silas, played by Eric Kofi Abrifa. Lamar is introduced as Meech's unpredictable rival, a once powerful dealer who returns from a mental institution, ready to reclaim the streets that used to belong to him. From the moment he appears on screen, his energy is chaotic and dangerous, a man with nothing to lose and a grudge that runs deep.
When you see Duke, you tell him that Lamar Silas is back in town.
The show paints him as a walking nightmare, someone who doesn't just break the street code, but completely disregards it. Kidnappings, torture, random outbursts of rage. Lamar's violence feels personal and theatrical. His eerie ritual of singing "You Can't Stop the Rain" before killing someone turned him into one of TV's most chilling villains, a kind of hood legend reborn as a horror character. But behind that dramatized monster was a real man, Laden Beast Simon. His name carried weight in Detroit long before BMF ever hit television screens. And unlike the show's exaggerated version, the real story between Simon and Meech wasn't about insanity or theatrics. It was about blood, betrayal, and revenge. Their feud was born out of real tragedy. Back in 1987, Layton's younger brother, Elvis, was killed during a shootout involving the 50 Boyz. The streets were buzzing with talk that Meech had bragged about Elvis's death afterward, and whether that was true or not, it lit a fire in Simon that would change everything.
See, after my brother got killed, allegedly, I was at his ass. And he know that. That's why he wearing them damn sunglasses.
The Lamar character in the show became this wild, unpredictable madman. But the real Layton Simon has made it clear in interviews that Hollywood took major creative liberties with his story. He wasn't institutionalized. He wasn't deranged. And he wasn't out here terrorizing women and kids. In fact, Simon said that part of the reason he took offense to the show's portrayal was because it made him look like a man without a moral compass. He claimed that no matter how deep things got in the streets, he kept one rule: don't touch families, don't hurt kids. According to him, if he had a problem, he went straight to the source, his enemies, not their loved ones.
Anybody that I get in a feud with, I'm coming after them. Not they mama, no, not they wives.
Simon even pushed back against the storyline where Lamar kills Nicole's teenage boyfriend Darius in an attempt to snatch her. He said that was pure fiction, a Hollywood twist for drama. In real life, he saw himself as someone who actually cared about kids, someone who was respected for it. People in the community, he said, would often say he was the guy who could be ruthless with his enemies, but still have love for the youth. It's a side of the story that never made it to TV because it didn't fit the image of a madman who sings before he kills. The real street war between Meech and Simon was nothing like the neatly packaged version fans saw on screen. According to Simon, things came to a head in a violent showdown that the show barely scratches the surface of. He says that in one encounter, he sprayed Meech's Jeep with 18 rounds, one of which hit Meech in the neck.
They say it was like 18 times. I'm like, it's so far underneath the damn dashboard, I couldn't really get to him. Some people say the guy hit him in his neck and then in the stomach.
The streets say that moment changed everything. It was the hit that made Big Meech leave Detroit for good, setting up the next chapter of his empire down in Atlanta. In the series, Lamar meets a predictably gruesome end, bleeding out after another wild confrontation. Poetic justice for a TV villain. But in real life, Layton, the Beast, Simon's story didn't end in a hail of bullets or a dramatic death scene. He's still alive today. After serving his time, he chose a completely different path, one that nobody would have expected from a man once known as a menace in Detroit. These days, Simon works as a youth advocate and community leader, trying to steer young people away from the same streets that nearly consumed him. He uses his clothing line, Made in Plain, to fund programs that give kids opportunities he never had. In BMF, Miles Truitt steps into the role of B-Mickie, the loyal childhood friend who's been with Meech and Terry since day one. From the early 50 Boyz days, B-Mickie is portrayed as one of the Flenory Brothers' most trusted soldiers, the kind of guy who would go to war for his crew without thinking twice. But as the series progresses, things take a darker turn. The show paints B-Mickie as a man torn between loyalty and ego, growing tired of always being in Meech's shadow. That frustration eventually leads him down a path of betrayal, secret love, and tragedy.
Tell Meech to come talk to me his damn self. He left town.
His relationship with Kato, played by Agiona Alexis, becomes one of the show's most emotional subplots. And when her double life as an informant is exposed, it all comes crashing down. In a gut-wrenching twist, B-Mickie is forced to kill Kato, the woman he loves, in order to prove his loyalty to Meech.
I love you.
But the truth behind all that drama is a whole lot different. The real person behind B-Mickie is Derek D. Meeks, and according to him, the TV version is more Hollywood than history. D. Meeks has openly said that the show got the essence of his relationship with Meech and Terry right. They really were like brothers growing up. They lived just down the street from each other, and they started hustling together before any of them had money or muscle. But as D. Meeks put it, the story viewers see on BMF is about 55% real and 45% fake.
When you actually got to see the show, you watched the whole first season?
Yeah.
What did you think?
55% accurate, 45% fake.
For starters, the whole storyline about Kato, the romance, the betrayal, and the murder never actually happened. Kato's character in the show, Catherine Lady Kato Ida, is based loosely on women who were around the 50 Boyz crew, but her tragic ending is pure fiction. In the series, she's portrayed as one of the few women working directly in the operation, handling money runs, securing stash houses, and controlling access points. Basically, a trusted foot soldier in a male-dominated world. She even saves Meech's life at one point by killing Detective Lopez in a brutal scene, but none of that reflected the real-life events around D. Meeks. He never had a romantic relationship with any woman in the crew, and there was never a betrayal that led to him having to kill someone he loved.
And were you guys in a relationship?
No.
Okay. And you never killed her, I assume.
Kato's alive and kicking, man.
The real D. Meeks story took a much more strategic turn. When the Flenory Brothers decided to expand the operation from Detroit to Atlanta, D. Meeks made a move that would change his life. He stepped away from the crew entirely. While Meech and Terry were preparing to scale up their empire, Meeks realized he didn't need to follow anyone else's blueprint anymore. He had already built the right connections and, most importantly, found his own plug. That meant independence. Once he went solo, D. Meeks started his own thing and made serious money. He later said he pulled in about $1.2 million after parting ways with the Flenoris. He wasn't caught up in the drama, the power struggles, or the growing attention that would later bring the entire BMF empire down. He just handled his business quietly and efficiently. And that decision paid off in more ways than one. When the massive federal indictments hit BMF in 2005, taking down dozens of members across multiple states, D. Meeks wasn't among them. He'd already distanced himself long before things got hot. Even when he faced his own legal battles, he was prepared. He had money set aside, enough to hire the best lawyer he could find. And that's what helped him beat 4 major charges. He did spend some time locked up in 1992 for a shooting charge, but unlike many of his peers, he walked away from the game with his life and freedom intact. Now, while the show mostly zeroes in on the personal tension between Meech and Terry, the real BMF story was something much bigger, a masterclass in organization, structure, and logistics that rivaled legitimate corporations. Behind all the street glamour and fast cars was a sophisticated empire built with precision. Every member had a role, every move was calculated, and while the TV version leans heavily on the drama, the real machine that the Flenory Brothers built ran like a well-oiled industry. After Meech was forced to leave Detroit following his near-fatal shooting, he relocated to Atlanta, a city that would soon become the beating heart of the entire operation. Meanwhile, Terry set up in Los Angeles around 2003, turning what started as a Detroit street hustle into a full-blown coast-to-coast enterprise.
Once we see how they was living, like they was living on another level in Atlanta, you know, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 houses. That was a lot of money back then.
They were no longer thinking like dealers. They were thinking like CEOs. The move was a strategic pivot toward building a national distribution chain that stretched across the country, one that would eventually become too massive for even the federal government to ignore. The DEA's investigation, codenamed Operation Motor City Mafia, would later reveal that BMF had over 500 active members nationwide. By the time the indictments came down, their network had touched more than a dozen states, from Alabama and Tennessee all the way to California and Ohio. What the government uncovered wasn't just a gang or a crew. It was a full-blown cartel disguised as a street organization. The real brilliance of BMF wasn't in the violence, it was in the logistics. Meech and Terry built their empire like businessmen, creating departments and systems that ensured nothing got lost and no one talked too much. They had couriers, distributors, accountants, and even engineers, all working to keep the operation moving. At the center of this machine was Dexter Sosa Hussey, the man in charge of logistics. His job was simple on paper, but impossible in scale. Move the cash. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of it, without ever getting caught.
BMF was run like a Fortune 500 company.
Yes.
There's a CEO, a COO, a CFO, vice presidents.
Logistics.
Yeah.
At its peak, BMF was moving anywhere between 1,200 and 1,500 kilos every single month. That's over a ton of monthly. Some insiders say the real number was even higher, as much as 6 to 9 tons per year. Over a decade, the organization reportedly pulled in around $270 million in profits. The secret to keeping all that weight undetected came down to their ingenuity. They used luxury vehicles modified with hidden compartments known as trap cars. These weren't sloppy or makeshift. They were professionally engineered. From the outside, the cars looked untouched, down to the factory finish and weight distribution, making them nearly impossible for police dogs or scales to detect. A single trap could carry up to 200 kilograms of cocaine, safely tucked away beneath fine leather interiors and custom panels. The people driving those cars were paid handsomely for the risk. Couriers moving drugs from Los Angeles to the labs in Atlanta or Detroit could make anywhere from $8,000 to $25,000 per trip. The return trips carrying the cash back west weren't as dangerous, so they paid less, usually around $1,000 per run. It was a dangerous but lucrative rotation that kept the product and profits constantly in motion. And that's exactly what made BMF so hard to stop. According to Sosa, Meech's trusted lieutenant in Atlanta, the organization ran on a system they called hot potato. Nothing ever stayed in one place for long. As soon as a shipment landed, it was broken down and sent right back out, passed through multiple hands and states so that law enforcement could never pinpoint the stash or the command center.
We play hot potato. As soon as they come in, they gone already.
Okay.
So they go, and then that particular vehicle is on the move again.
This non-stop motion made surveillance nearly impossible. The goal was always speed and efficiency, not flash. Despite the chaos around them, BMF ran like a corporate supply chain, just one that happened to deal in. BMF operated primarily as a wholesale business. They weren't trying to flood the corners with street-level deals. Instead, they supplied major distributors who handled the retail side. It was cleaner, quieter, and far less likely to draw unwanted heat. Meech, despite his love for the limelight, understood one thing clearly: violence brought attention, and attention was bad for business. That's where his next move came in, the creation of BMF Entertainment. On the surface, it looked like a hip-hop label, signing artists, throwing massive parties, rubbing shoulders with celebrities like Young Jeezy and T.I. But in reality, it was a smokescreen. The label, the cars, the champagne, all of it was a front designed to launder money and create confusion. Meech wanted the public and police to see the flash, not the operation. He encouraged his people to go all out. Buy the cars, wear the jewelry, throw the parties. The more noise they made, the more the DEA and local law enforcement would focus on the visible side of the empire, the rappers, the promoters, the partygoers, while the real work continued quietly in the shadows. It was a clever strategy, and for years, it worked perfectly.
So much of the evidence was about lifestyle. The shocking lifestyle of Demetrius Flenory.
But the operation's reach went even deeper than anyone could have imagined. According to Dexter Hussey, BMF had insiders on their payroll, actual agents and investigators feeding them information about upcoming raids and surveillance activity. Whenever the heat got too close, someone would tip them off and they'd pull back, move the product, or lay low just in time. This kind of deep-seated corruption made BMF nearly untouchable for a while. The show's Detective Bryant may seem like a lone wolf chasing Meech, but in reality, the level of infiltration inside law enforcement was far more sophisticated and dangerous. Still, as with every empire, cracks began to show. By 2003, the same brothers who once shared everything started drifting apart. This great schism, as some called it, would become the beginning of the end for the Black Mafia family. The real reason behind the split between the Flenory brothers went much deeper than what the BMF series shows. The root of it all was Meech's increasingly flashy lifestyle in Atlanta. Terry, who had relocated to Los Angeles, grew frustrated watching his older brother's empire turn into a non-stop party. To him, Meech was drawing the wrong kind of attention: rappers, promoters, groupies, and law enforcement. While Meech wanted to blend street power with celebrity status, Terry believed all the fame and noise would eventually destroy everything they had built. According to people close to the operation, the tension between the brothers became explosive. Terry was done trying to reason with Meech. He told associates that his brother was reckless, unpredictable, a crazy bastard who couldn't be controlled, and that every major problem BMF faced traced back to him. But Meech was careful. He didn't use the phone for business, and that made it nearly impossible for investigators to catch him slipping. Terry, however, was the opposite. He lived on the phone.
I never liked phones. See? You like to talk on the phone. I don't do that. I'm not gonna be on the phone telling you to load this car and get these things down south. I never wrote nothing down about nothing. No nicknames, no nothing. Anything written down was my brother's.
The DEA's investigation, Operation Motor City Mafia, took full advantage of that. Agents tapped Terry's line and, over a span of 5 months, recorded nearly 900 pages worth of calls. Those wiretaps captured everything: Terry's worries, his frustrations about Meech, and detailed discussions about the organization's operations. Without even realizing it, he had given the government a play-by-play of their empire. In trying to vent his anger and manage his side of the business, Terry became the government's biggest source of evidence. He even warned Meech that if his brother didn't slow down, someone would eventually take him out. What he didn't realize was that his own conversations were doing exactly that, slowly killing the empire from the inside. The federal prosecutors couldn't have asked for better evidence. When the indictments finally dropped, those wiretaps were the nail in the coffin, leading to both brothers getting hit with 30-year federal sentences. The show often dramatizes violence through storylines and rivalries, but the real-life violence surrounding the organization was far more unpredictable. When the federal indictment dropped, it didn't just accuse the organization of moving tons of coke, it also tied them to several high-profile violent incidents that turned Atlanta into a target zone for investigators. One of the most infamous was the Club Chaos shooting in November 2003. That night, Meech was in the club when an argument broke out with Anthony Wolf Jones, a man who used to be Sean Diddy Combs' bodyguard. What started as a minor altercation over a woman spiraled out of control. Shots rang out in the parking lot. Meech got hit in the buttocks, but Wolf Jones and another man, Lamont Gertie, didn't make it. They were both killed. When the police brought Meech in, he made a move that surprised everyone. Instead of lawyering up, he decided to talk. According to investigators, it was a calculated play to throw off the case. By talking directly to the police, Meech managed to stall the process just long enough to prevent a formal murder charge from being filed. Without a case number or a direct witness willing to testify, the homicide investigation went nowhere. Meech was placed under house arrest for a while, but eventually cleared. The violence didn't stop there. In 2004, another deadly incident unfolded at the Midtown Velvet Room, one that perfectly captured the arrogance and volatility of BMF at its peak. Rashanable Drummond, an unarmed man, ended up being killed after he reportedly slapped one of BMF's prized luxury cars during a heated argument. That single act of disrespect set off a chain reaction. A BMF member, Fleming Daniels, allegedly pulled out a gun and executed Drummond right there in the parking lot. And even years after the downfall, the ghost of BMF still lingered in the streets. One of Meech's loyal soldiers, Christopher Pig Triplett, believed to be the real-life inspiration for the show's character Hoop, was killed in 2020. His death was a reminder that the legacy of BMF's violence didn't end when the indictments came down. Now, the real downfall of BMF wasn't about rival gangs, shootouts, or turf wars. It was about betrayal. For years, the organization lived by one simple mantra: death before dishonor. Loyalty was supposed to be the lifeblood that kept everything running. In Meech and Terry's world, breaking the code meant you were done for. But when the DEA came knocking with life sentences on the table, that code started to crumble fast. Fear of dying in prison became stronger than loyalty to the streets. The DEA's Operation Motor City Mafia was ruthless and methodical. They didn't go straight for Meech or Terry at first. Instead, they picked off the mid-level players, the ones who had just enough involvement to know everything, but not enough power to protect themselves. The strategy was simple: apply pressure, promise leniency, and watch the whole organization turn on itself. It worked better than anyone expected. One by one, the insiders started flipping, and the myth of BMF's untouchable brotherhood started falling apart. One of the biggest blows came from a man most people had never even heard of: William Doc Marshall. He wasn't a street soldier or a corner dealer. He was BMF's money man, their version of a chief financial officer. On the surface, he looked clean. Marshall ran a luxury car brokerage called Exquisite Empire, selling Bentleys and Lamborghinis to rappers, athletes, and celebrities. But behind the scenes, he was laundering drug money for the Flenory Brothers, turning dirty cash into assets that looked legitimate. When the feds finally caught him, Marshall was staring down a 20-year sentence. That kind of time can make even the hardest man rethink his loyalties. Instead of going down with the ship, he flipped. He sat down with investigators and laid it all out. How Terry funneled money through his girlfriend's accounts, how cash was cleaned through businesses like daycare centers, and how millions in drug money flowed through his luxury car operation. His testimony gave the government exactly what it needed: a financial map of BMF's empire. Because of his cooperation, Marshall served only 8 years instead of 20. But the betrayal didn't stop there. Omari McCree, one of Meech's most trusted street lieutenants in Atlanta, was next.
The next domino, I would say, was focusing more on these people who were mid to higher level, and one of those guys would have been Omari McCree.
McCree had built a name for himself as a top distributor, someone Meech personally favored, but when the walls started closing in, he panicked. On June 8, 2005, the DEA arrested him. Within 2 hours, he signed a confidential source agreement. That's how fast the fear hit him. McCree told investigators exactly how the organization operated, naming Demetrius Flenory directly as his source for cocaine. That testimony was devastating. For years, Meech had managed to keep himself insulated, always staying one step removed from the drugs. McCree's cooperation shattered that shield completely. Even Jay Bowe, Meech's St. Louis deputy, later said that once McCree flipped, it was over. The final nail in the coffin came from inside the world that Meech loved the most: hip-hop. When Meech launched BMF Entertainment, it wasn't just about music. It was a way to build legitimacy, to turn the street empire into a global brand. The face of that movement was rapper Blue Da Vinci. He was young, charismatic, and ambitious, and he gave the label a level of credibility that attracted major artists and attention. But fame has a way of opening doors the feds were waiting to walk through. When the indictments came, Blue Da Vinci was sentenced to 5 years and 4 months in prison. But behind the scenes, rumors swirled that cooperation played a role in reducing that sentence. His legal team reportedly offered to cooperate with prosecutors, helping connect dots that the DEA couldn't fully piece together. On top of that, an old Smack DVD interview that Blue had done years earlier became a key piece of evidence. In it, members of BMF appeared on camera, showing off cars, jewelry, and stacks of money. What was supposed to be a flex turned into a roadmap for investigators. That video helped federal agents identify several members who had previously slipped under the radar. By October 2005, the full weight of the federal government came crashing down. Operation Motor City Mafia resulted in the indictment of the Flenory Brothers and 41 other people. Meech was hit with 7 counts, and Terry faced 9, including running a continuing criminal enterprise and conspiracy to launder money. The government came for everything: cash, jewelry, cars, houses. They wanted it all. The feds sought to seize $270 million in assets, including more than 30 pieces of jewelry, 13 properties, and 35 vehicles, BMWs, Bentleys, even a Lincoln limousine. The DEA painted BMF as a violent, highly organized drug smuggling and money laundering syndicate with direct links to Mexican cartels. To them, this wasn't just another drug case. It was a blueprint for how American street empires had evolved. Then, there's how the show painted Charles and Lucille Flenory as the spiritual anchors of the Flenory family, two church-going parents doing everything they can to pull their sons out of the streets. Their faith, discipline, and deep belief in morality constantly clashed with Meech and Terry's ambitions. On screen, they're seen praying, arguing, and pleading for their boys to find another way, holding on to hope that family and faith could overpower the lure of fast money.
Your mother and I busted our butt to give you everything you needed.
But in reality, the situation was far more brutal because it wasn't just the streets that came after the family, it was the government. When the federal heat came down on BMF, the feds didn't just go after Meech and Terry, they went after anyone tied to them, including their own father, Charles Flenory. The government's move was calculated. Charles was pulled into the indictment and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for money laundering. His crime was simply passing an envelope of money to a contractor, a move prosecutors twisted into evidence of participation. It was the kind of technicality that showed how far the feds were willing to go to pressure Meech and Terry. Meech always believed this was part of the government's strategy, to use family as leverage, to make them break, and in the end, that's exactly what happened. By November 2007, both brothers ended up pleading guilty to charges of continuing criminal enterprise and money laundering, each receiving a 30-year sentence. But the road to that plea was anything but straightforward. Meech, known for his pride and defiance, initially refused to fold. He maintained his innocence through most of the plea negotiations, determined to fight the case. Eventually, though, he agreed to a Rule 11 plea deal, but even that wasn't enough for the court. The trial judge insisted on something that changed everything: a full confession. The deal didn't legally require Meech to admit guilt in open court, but the judge made it clear he wanted to hear how Meech was guilty before accepting the plea. That demand turned the agreement into a trap. Once Meech spoke, he effectively gave up his right against self-incrimination. If he ever tried to back out of the plea or fight the charges again, prosecutors could use his own confession and testimony against him. It was a no-win situation. Talk and lose your shot at appeal, or stay silent and risk the plea falling apart. So Meech confessed. He laid out details of the crimes, gave the court what it wanted, and sealed his own fate. 30 years. No more fight left. And to make it worse, he later said the confession wasn't just about the law. It was about protecting his people. He believed prosecutors had threatened to drag his mother and sister into the case, claiming they could face charges based on conversations caught on Terry's wiretap. With that kind of pressure, Meech took the hit. The years that followed marked the true split between the brothers. Terry, the younger Flenory, was the first to see freedom. In May 2020, he was granted compassionate release from prison due to health issues. As the pandemic led to the release of select federal inmates, he went home to Detroit, reconnecting with family and slowly rebuilding a quieter life. Meech, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. He filed for the same early release, but the court denied his request. The judge pointed to his prison record, infractions for cell phones, weapons, and even drug use, claiming that Meech still carried himself like the boss of an empire, not a man seeking redemption. Still, Meech didn't stay down forever. After years of legal battles, he finally walked out of prison on October 16th, 2024.